After the conclusion of the 2024 Paris Olympics, many volleyball players announced their retirement from their national teams. However, some didn't make such drastic decisions and simply put their international careers on pause. One of these players is Yuji Nishida, the opposite hitter for the Japanese national team, whom I'd like to focus on today. As usual in our favorite segment Play Like a Pro, we'll dive into the most interesting parts of his biography and take a closer look at his technical skills. So, as always, let's not waste any time. Let's go! Yuji was born on January 30th, 2000, in the small town of Inabe, Japan. At the age of 4, he followed the example of his older brother and sister and began playing volleyball, even though his parents were basketball players. Like many other volleyball players, Yuji spent a long time deciding which sport he would ultimately dedicate his life to. The final decision was made in middle school. Yuji's parents were very demanding of basketball coaches and often criticized his older brother for his skills. Yuji, seeing this, figured it might become an issue for him too, so he chose volleyball. Even his parents jokingly said he shouldn't pursue basketball. The key advice he received from his parents was, either do it or don't. They hated half-hearted efforts. Either you give 100% or don't do it at all or nothing. A simple truth. Despite his love for volleyball, Nishida never initially considered it as a professional path. In his mind, he planned to focus on his main job and play volleyball only if he had time afterward. A bit odd coming from someone whose earliest memories are tied to a gym and who had already developed a love for the sport by age 4. Yuji didn't attend a particularly strong volleyball school, so serious achievements were unlikely. Coaches frequently changed, and not all of them had any volleyball experience, meaning the training conditions weren't ideal. But despite this, thanks to his individual talent, Nishida received offers to transfer to stronger schools, which he declined. At the time, volleyball wasn't his top priority, and he didn't see the need for such changes. However, Yuji has a character that doesn't allow him to lose easily. To get better results, he took it upon himself to coach his own team, which consisted of just 5 players, 4 of whom barely knew how to play volleyball. Nishida attended other schools' practices, not so much to improve himself, but to observe their training methods. Despite the challenges and his strong will, the future opposite of Japan's national team first focused on instilling a love for volleyball in his teammates, shaping his training sessions around that goal. Here I want to highlight an interesting thought that Nishida himself mentioned. When you train on your own, many of your movements become intuitive, but when you teach someone else, you have to be able to explain everything you do and try to transfer that knowledge to another player. This not only helps your teammates but also improves your understanding of your own weaknesses. I can totally relate to this. When I started giving advice to beginner volleyball players, I realized that I often made the same mistakes, and after reflecting on this, I now try to correct these issues in my own game. Yuji is a source of motivation for many young volleyball players. Despite not being particularly tall for a professional volleyball player, most sources put him at 186 centimeters. He has succeeded on the world stage as an opposite. One of the keys to his success is his incredible 105 cm vertical jump. Nishida has been working on his jump since childhood. Near his school, there was a bridge where he would constantly jump and try to reach higher and higher. As he got older, he added strength training to his routine, which is evident when you look at his impressive muscle mass, especially for a volleyball player. This later caused some issues which we will talk about later. What motivated Nishida? He was first inspired by the Olympic dream while watching the 2008 Beijing Olympics at the age of 8. Although Yuji admits he barely remembers this moment, his parents clearly recall his determination. At the time, he loved watching Shimizu, the legendary left-handed Japanese opposite. Nowadays, however, Nishida says he wants to carve his own path rather than copy someone else's career. While he might not remember that childhood moment well, Yuji took his first step toward his Olympic dream when he was called up to the U-19 national team. The announcement that the Olympics would be held in Tokyo further fueled his determination to make the senior national team and compete in that tournament. For many beginner volleyball players, manga and anime like Haikyuu were also sources of motivation. Nishida is no exception. He mentioned that Haikyuu is very realistic and that he often recalled moments from his childhood while reading it. The only fantastical part, he noted, was Hinata spiking with his eyes closed. Most people compare Yuji to Hinata because of his shorter stature and incredible jumping ability. Some even call him the real-life Hinata. However, Nishida sees himself as a combination of several characters. Primarily, he relates to Ushijima, the left-handed opposite from Shiratorizawa, but personality-wise he sees himself more like Bokuto because of his ability to get fired up during matches. If he had to pick a favorite match from the manga, it would be Karasuno vs Enarizaki. His favorite setter, Miya Atsumu. Of course, we can't forget about Yuji's professional career, which officially began with the Stings. At just 17 years old, he became the youngest player to ever debut in Japan's top volleyball league. His debut was so successful that he quickly became a regular starter. Nishida helped his team win their first Empress Cup and the gold in the V-League before setting off for Italy to take on a new challenge. Unfortunately, despite a strong individual season, the Japanese opposite stayed in Italy's Superlega for only 1 year. Yes, Yuji proved to himself that he could compete against the world's best, but he felt that continuing in Italy would require him to focus entirely on a power-based game. Realizing that as a shorter player this would limit his growth, he chose to return to Japan to continue developing his technical skills. Sadly, despite his young age, Yuji has already accumulated a significant injury history. First, he injured his ankle during an intra-squad scrimmage with the national team. In Italy, he missed 2 months due to a calf injury, which hurt his team's standing in the league. In the previous international season, he hurt his back, which allowed Miyaura to step in and Japan won their first ever Nations League medal. He returned for his club's final match, missing a large part of the season. But the toughest challenge came after his return to Japan's league, when Nishida faced a mysterious illness that doctors struggled to diagnose. He experienced abnormal temperature fluctuations, and blood tests showed anomalies in 25 different markers, but none pointed to any known disease. Yuji was taking around 10 medications, but his condition only worsened, and at one point he even considered retiring. However, he managed to get through the difficult time and continues to thrill his fans. The heartbreaking defeat in the quarterfinals of the Paris Olympics, where Japan lost to Italy after leading 2-0 in sets and 24-21 in the third, was a huge blow. After 7 seasons with the national team, Nishida decided to take a break and focus on his family. His wife Sarina Koga retired from the national team at 28, after leading Japan in 2024 as team captain. With that, let's wrap up the biography and move on to analyzing his technique and playing trends. So, let's dive into the breakdown. My dear friend, if you'd like to help support the channel, you can become a sponsor or send a donation. The links will be in the video description. Thank you so much for your support. Yuji Nishida, along with Yuki Ishikawa, was one of the first volleyball players whose technique I analyzed. Unfortunately, that video was taken down due to copyright issues, so many of you haven't seen it. I released it 4 years ago and I was excited to revisit this player with a fresh perspective on volleyball technique. Most of my original points still stand. One key factor in Nishida's success as a hitter is his ability to generate speed in his approach and translate that into a powerful jump. Here, his genetic predisposition to jumping and his massive strength training work perfectly together. I'll explain later how this strength manifests in his game. For example, Yuji used to regularly employ a 4-step approach for attacks, both from the front and back row, which gave him extra starting speed that he converted into his jump. Now, with his increased strength, he can generate the same height or even more with just 3 steps, and sometimes only 2 when attacking from the front row. Using more steps might give him an even higher jump, but in volleyball, height isn't always the top priority. Gaining 1, 2 or 3 centimeters in height might cause an opposite to lose out on other, more important aspects of the game. Here are 3 reasons why I think Yuji's decision to drop the 4th step was smart. First, it saves time. Volleyball is getting faster and every fraction of a second counts. Second, it provides a more stable approach. He can always fit in his 2 to 3 steps, but fitting in 4 steps is much harder. When your approach and jump height aren't stable, you end up focusing on coordination rather than decision making, which can let you down at the highest level. And the final benefit of a shorter approach is better ball control. Since your approach is shorter, you get into position earlier, making it much easier to figure out where you'll be contacting the ball. This greatly reduces the chances of mistiming your approach, especially if you're a beginner or just a recreational volleyball player. I've been working for a long time to stabilize my approach, but since I don't have the same massive amount of practice that professionals do, I still struggle with this part when I try to add more steps to my approach and maximize my jump. Now back to strength. Having powerful legs allows you to generate an explosive jump, even in a short amount of time, which is something less physically developed players can't always do. The difference between a full long approach and a jump with limited steps will be massive for them. A critical factor is timing your approach well, especially for an opposite hitter. Most of the time the setter can't see where their teammate is, since the opposite is behind them. That's why the setter needs to trust that the player in Zone 2 or Zone 1 is ready to attack, so they don't hesitate to set the ball to them. Yuji is great in this area. He never leaves any doubt, getting to his starting position for the approach as quickly as possible. He also perfectly judges his distance from the setter based on where the setter is on the court. Technically, it's hard to find any flaws in Yuji's game. If you watch any videos about improving your jump, particularly on how to jump off 2 feet, you'll see that his technique is pretty much perfect. His gradual speed increase, reaching its peak just before his last step, looks flawless. His penultimate step is so long that it generates incredible power, which he converts from horizontal to vertical motion with his planned step. I'll talk more about foot placement when we get into attacking tendencies for opposites, since everything is closely connected. But for now, I'll just say this. I often tell players to use a long step before their jump. But not everyone can make it work because it requires strong legs, and many beginners neglect strength training. Meanwhile, let's keep praising Nishida's perfect technique. His arm swing, despite his fairly broad back, is incredibly wide, which adds a lot to his overall jump height. His arms move in a vertical trajectory, channeling all the stored energy upward, adding to his jump height instead of dissipating it, which often happens at the recreational level when players swing their arms more horizontally. His free hand, in Yuji's case the right hand, works all the way through the jump, acting as a guide. Just before starting his attack, Yuji points his free hand at the ball as if signaling, "This is the ball I'm about to hit." It's actually a great tip for beginner volleyball players, or even for me. I've been actively working on automating this technique for a while now. As I mentioned in my first analysis of Nishida, he uses insane body rotation. Just look at how fully he opens up before his attack. I said this in my first breakdown of this opposite hitter, but this technique adds power to his hits, even though it takes more time to execute. But with Yuji's speed, it doesn't bother him at all. However, trying to replicate this technique yourself would be extremely challenging, and for most nearly impossible. This kind of body control is a genetic trait common among many Asian athletes, which I also noticed during my weightlifting days. Asian lifters use a different technique from the classic European style, simply because it's more comfortable for them due to their body structure. This concept applies to volleyball and to Nishida in particular. But his finishing move is pretty standard. A reverse body rotation, bringing the elbow forward, followed by a wrist snap. Nothing out of the ordinary here. Let's move on to Nishida's main attacking tendencies, which are closely tied to his plant step. Most of Yuji's attacks come from Zone 1. Here, when he jumps, he turns his foot inward, and his foot placement is quite narrow. His body faces the corner of Zone 1, making this his go-to direction for attacks. Of course, he does attack down the line, but that's not really a signature move for this opposite. Even less frequently, Yuji attacks down the line from Zone 2. Here, when he jumps, he hardly turns his plant foot at all because both feet are parallel to the net with a narrow stance. This forces him to rotate his body almost fully in the air if he wants to hit down the line. So his most common shot here is between Zone 1 and Zone 6. And despite some improvement over time, Nishida is still not the most effective front row attacker. During the last international season, Nishida showed more efficiency, attacking from Zone 4. Here, his feet are perpendicular to the net and set fairly wide apart. His main pattern here is to cut inside to Zone 6 with speed. We also can't ignore Nishida's blocking skills. He uses his technical ability to its fullest here too. His powerful, wide, aggressive last step and full arm swing help him generate a high jump when blocking. Sometimes an opposite doesn't fully turn sideways during the approach, but most of the time, even on short approaches, Yuji sticks to his usual technique. Nishida typically positions himself close to his middle blocker but initially turns toward his assigned blocking zone, so he's ready for a battle at the net's edge. At the same time, he positions himself to assist his teammates in the middle when defending attacks from the opponent. It's clear that Nishida is also a strong defender, since he often plays with the shorter setters. When the opponent is attacking from Zone 4, Yuji positions himself more to guard against tips over the block rather than straight line shots. These tips usually don't land tightly on the line. When defending against attacks from other zones, Nishida tends to stay in roughly the same position. Let's finish this analysis as usual with his serve, and true to tradition, we'll start with his pre-serve ritual. Nishida has a few unique steps here. First, on his way to the service line, he tosses the ball with his right hand. Then, after bouncing it off the ground, he turns, holds the ball with both hands, and brings it up to his face. Next, he holds the ball in his right hand, exhales powerfully, and tosses it up with his right hand, hitting it with his left. The serve itself mechanically resembles his attacks from Zone 1. There's that same aggressive fast penultimate step, identical foot positioning with a turn of the right foot and a full arm swing. His free hand controls the ball's trajectory. Of course, we can't forget about his intense body rotation and textbook perfect finishing move. His most frequently used serving targets are Zone 6 and the seam between Zones 5 and 6. Most of Nishida's serves head in this direction. If he wants to throw in some surprise, he'll serve down the line. That's how this breakdown of Japanese opposite Yuji Nishida turned out. I really hope you enjoyed it because I put a lot of effort into creating it. So I'm definitely looking forward to your likes and subscriptions. Also, don't forget to comment on who you'd like to see in future episodes. As always, this was Nick. Love what you do and you'll definitely succeed. See you soon. Bye.